This video was brought to you by Brilliant. Despite being a founding member, Turkey has always been a bit of an odd one out in NATO, and Erdogan's adventurist and unilateral foreign policy has only strained relations yet further. In fact, tensions reached a new high last year when Erdogan blocked the accession of Sweden and Finland into the alliance, provoking angry comments from pro-NATO Western commentators, suggesting that Turkey should just leave the bloc themselves. Now, the first thing to say here is that NATO's charter doesn't have an expulsion mechanism, so there's no way that Turkey could practically be kicked out. But while Turkey's voluntary departure might sound unlikely, it's not impossible. After Kurdish protesters set fire to an effigy of Erdogan and a far-right Danish politician burned the Quran in Stockholm, Erdogan reacted furiously, cancelling a scheduled meeting with the Swedish defense minister and temporarily suspending negotiations. In fact, the deputy leader of Turkey's Patriotic Party even predicted that Turkey would end up leaving NATO before the end of 2023 and announced the start of the party's Let's Leave NATO campaign. Now, we should say here that Erdogan's party were quick to dismiss this idea, with an AKP spokesman insisting that, quote, "those who call for terminating Turkey's membership of NATO do not talk sense." And to be fair, Turkey-NATO relations have apparently improved a little after a visit by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken earlier this week, where the US announced $100 million worth of aid in response to the devastating earthquakes that hit the country, as well as the intention to supply F-16 jets to Turkey. Nonetheless, Turkey are still obstructing Sweden's accession, and significant friction still remains. So in this video, we thought we'd take a look at one of the biggest questions of transatlantic security. Will Turkey ever leave NATO? Okay, so in this video, we're going to present 3 reasons why we think that Turkey might leave, and then 3 reasons why they might stay. And then we'll leave it up to you to decide what you think is most likely to happen. The first reason to think that Turkey might leave is something we've already alluded to: Turkey's different strategic priorities. Much of NATO, especially its eastern flank, is almost exclusively focused on Russia. But Turkey's geopolitical priority is usually the Middle East, which other NATO members just don't really care all that much about. And in response, Erdogan isn't all that fussed about Russia. Turkey originally positioned themselves as a mediator between Ukraine and Russia, and towed Moscow's line in refusing to describe the invasion as a war for the first few days. And today, Turkey is still the only NATO member that hasn't sanctioned Russia, and Russian capital flows in return have provided a lifeline for Turkey's overheating economy. Similarly, in the Middle East, Turkey's interests actually sometimes clash with that of other members. In Syria, for example, Turkey is actually fighting against the US-backed Kurdish rebels, and US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin expressed strong opposition to Turkey's new military operation in northern Syria. Going forward then, this diversion of strategic interests is likely to continue if NATO takes a new hawkish stance on China. Despite being predominantly a European alliance, the US has been encouraging NATO to focus on China and the Asia-Pacific for a while now. In fact, at their annual summit in Madrid last year, NATO was joined by Korea, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. And Jens Stoltenberg even visited Japan and South Korea in late January. This is something that we raised with Barbara Brace, NATO's Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy, when we spoke to her at the Munich Security Conference.
On that kind of topic of what different people believe and different attitudes in different parts of NATO, there's beginning to be more of a divergence between Europe and the US on the issue of China. Do you think that this could begin to put NATO's unity under strain going forward in a similar way that Iraq did in the early 2000s?
Well, one thing is clear, that China has not been transparent either about its intentions or capabilities, what it is doing. Military, hybrid, information, international law, and so on and so forth. So I think China being more transparent, actually talking to other countries about their intentions and plans would be very helpful to clarify these misunderstandings or lack of information or lack of transparency about the intentions. NATO describes China as a challenge, so it's not a threat, unlike Russia and terrorism, which is clearly identified as 2 threats for NATO.
It's not just China in Asia, though, that's getting a lot of attention at the moment. It's clear over the last few months that many NATO member states, especially the US, are taking a special interest in the Asia-Pacific region. In fact, Jens Stoltenberg recently went to Japan and South Korea. Do you think it's likely that we'll ever see an Asian nation join NATO or any non-European?
Well, Asian nations can join NATO unless the Washington Treaty is changed. However, we have really good partners in many places in the world. And what it means having a partner for NATO, it means that different countries, of course, see things differently. But what they care about is security. And they understand that in certain angles, NATO is the best partner.
By the way, if you want to check out that full interview, it is linked in the description. Anyway, despite some tension over the question of Uyghurs in China, Turkey and China do have pretty good relations. Turkey is a key player in Xi's Belt and Road Initiative, and just last year, Erdogan announced his intention to join the China-led Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Clearly then, if NATO does reorient itself towards China, then Turkey is unlikely to follow suit. On to the second reason. NATO doesn't actually do that much for Turkey, in part because of their different strategic priorities. NATO hasn't proved to be the most reliable partner for the country. In 2012, for example, Turkey asked NATO for Patriot air defense systems after 5 Turkish civilians were killed by Syrian shells. But the US withdrew these systems in 2020, and Turkey eventually ended up buying Russian S-400 air defense systems in order to replace it. And Erdogan was actually quite openly bitter about the fact that NATO refused to send troops to help Turkey when it decided to go into Syria in 2016, but were happy to send extra troops to Lithuania to deter Russian aggression in 2017. You get the idea then. At least from Turkey's perspective, NATO hasn't proved to be the most reliable security partner. The third and final reason that Turkey might leave NATO is that it's just not all that popular with the Turkish public. For a whole load of reasons, including general antipathy towards the US and fellow member states like Greece, most ordinary Turks want Turkey to leave the alliance. In fact, Turks are consistently some of the least enthusiastic about NATO. And a poll from June found that an astonishing 90% of Turks believe that NATO would not stand beside Turkey in the case of a potential dispute. On top of that, 84.6% said that NATO did not protect Turkey's interests. 55.7% said that they didn't trust NATO to defend Turkey in the case of an invasion. And 51.7% said that they believe the bloc exploits Turkey for its own interests. So those are the 3 reasons that Turkey might leave NATO. On to the 3 reasons why it won't. The first reason is Greece. Turkey and Greece have a pretty tense relationship, and Erdogan has made some pretty remarkably bellicose statements on the issue in recent years. However, if Turkey was to leave the alliance, this would give Greece a massive advantage, because in the event of a conflict, Greece would have the entire backing of NATO, while Turkey would be pretty much alone. The second reason is that being in NATO actually gives Erdogan more geopolitical leverage, as demonstrated by the whole Sweden debacle. While Turkey's foreign minister denied that the 2 events were related, it looks like Erdogan has successfully used their NATO veto in order to leverage the US into providing F-16 jets, something they've wanted for a couple of years now. The point is that even if Turkey isn't happy about the prospects of an alliance, Erdogan clearly has more influence inside the tent than he does outside. The third reason is a simple one, and probably the most important. Whatever qualms Erdogan might have, NATO membership is ultimately the world's most effective security guarantee, in large part thanks to the US's immense military power. This is why, even if they don't like the alliance itself, most Turks still want to be in NATO, and as such, Erdogan has no intention of leaving anytime soon. Again, this is something that Biba Braze talked about in her interview with us.
So he is the most successful political military alliance, and it's a defensive alliance. As I said, it's a peace project for its NATOs. People can have different opinions, but ultimately, when we look at the numbers and when we look at the commitment of the political and military decision makers, they all want to be in NATO. They all want to share the peace project and make sure that also the future generations in our country do that.
So what do you think? While it doesn't look likely to happen anytime soon, given Erdogan's position on the issue, do you think that Turkey might ever leave? Or would it be self-harming madness to unilaterally quit the world's most successful military alliance? Ultimately, though, we all want to be that kind of person who learns something new every day. That's likely why you watch our videos. And that makes sense, because everyday learning keeps us sharp and makes us and the world around us more interesting. But the reality is that daily learning is hard to do, and that's where Brilliant.org comes in. That's because Brilliant.org is the best way to learn vital skills like maths, computer science, and decision making interactively. And Brilliant has thousands of lessons, from foundational and advanced maths to the latest artificial intelligence, data science, neural networks, and more, with new lessons added monthly and staying on top of the latest developments and trends that you hear about in the news and even in our videos. Plus, the course on the joys of problem solving is a particularly great start for our viewers, running through the fundamental decision-making processes that experts and even politicians make every day. Or at least the good ones do. So take a positive step in your learning and check out everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days by clicking the special link in the description. Plus, the first 200 people of you sign up will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Thanks for your support.